Thanks, Ceann Corley. I welcome the opportunity to speak on this motion. Sinn Féin is very much in favour of the promotion of all sustainable forms of transport, in particular public transport and cycling. We think that a wider view needs to be taken and that all planning initiatives must prioritise public transport and cyclists, and that the reduction of private cars in our cities should be a top priority. And these priorities go hand in hand. The best way to reduce car use is to ensure that public transport is reliable, frequent and affordable. There is a long way to go in this regard in this state, in particular in rural areas. And whilst many parts of Dublin are very well served, others could do with some improvement. Rural services vary, with some areas having reasonable service, but many areas are very poorly served and some areas have no service at all. In our alternative budget 2019, Sinn Féin pledged to increase spending on CIE companies by a quarter. That's over 70 million, with most of this funding targeted at rural bus services. Removing cars from the road is a no-brainer. Unfortunately, rather than increase services by investing in CIE companies, the Government is instead privatising Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus slowly but surely. A second tranche of Bus Éireann routes are due to be put out to tender in the near future, despite the fact that the Government had no idea whether or not the previous round of privatisation was successful or not. Cycling is another area that needs an increase in investment. Greenways and cycleways need to be developed, and the infrastructure in our cities need to be altered to ensure that our roads are cyclist-friendly. Cycling has increased dramatically in recent years in our cities. We need to ensure that cyclists can travel safely. We need to work towards ensuring that cycling infrastructure provides for safe journeys for cyclists. Sharing lanes with buses and other vehicles is simply not safe, and it acts as a barrier to those who would like to cycle but who feel it is simply too dangerous in our cities. I support much of what is called for in this motion, including dedicated cycle lanes and improved infrastructure. I think we're all in agreement on that. However, I must say that it is a bit rich for Fianna Fáil to put down this motion this evening. Last week they announced that they will happily prop up the Government for another year. They didn't revise their asks of the Government. They didn't raise any objection to the over 10,000 people who are homeless or the crisis in our health centre. They didn't ask for an increase in funding for cycle infrastructure either. They supported the last budget, which saw funding from the Department of Transport increase by only 20 million. Current funding increased by 50 million, 35 million of which is going to tourism, to take the bad look off the VAT increase in that sector. And it seems that only 9 million of that funding will be available for transport overall. The allocation of capital funding for the department was decreased by 30 million, minus 30 million. And Fianna Fáil 2 months ago gave this allocation the thumbs up and facilitated the passing of the budget, which provided absolutely next to nothing for transport. So I am urging Fianna Fáil to use their position to hold the Government to account instead of sitting on the fence. And regarding the amendments, I agree with some of the issues raised in the amendments put down this evening by the Green Party, in particular the Government's failure to implement government policies, in particular smarter travel, a sustainable transport future and the National Cycling Policy Framework. The Minister has been a bitter disappointment. Transport infrastructure and, as a consequence, the general public have been sorely let down by his inaction. It doesn't help that we have a history of poor planning and short-sightedness when it comes to our infrastructure. We also lost out on a decade of investment during the recession. The Government must prioritise sustainable methods of transport. We have the plans, we have the know-how, we just need the political will to secure funding and to drive this project on. And it won't be easy, and some might have to give a little in order for our cities to gain a lot. Dublin is 1,000 years old. We all know that it and other cities in Ireland present difficulties when it comes to widening of roads and building of new lanes and tracks. And we need to prioritise cycling and public transport. We need to shift the mindset from accommodating cars to prioritising sustainable transport. And while I support the motion, it must be pointed out that it is a motion, so it's just a statement really. It has no legal standing whatsoever, so it's important that interest groups understand this. But what is positive is that almost all parties appear to be on the same page in this matter, and I hope that the Minister will focus more of his energies on sustainable transport, including cycling, in the coming year.